You can't leave packages on your porch. It's against the rules. I'm going to get rid of them for you." That was the shriek I heard from my front yard, a sound that cut through the quiet afternoon like a rusty saw. It was followed by the distinct, sickening thud of cardboard hitting grass, then another, and another. I had only lived in Maple Creek Estates for 6 months, and I was already on a first-name basis with the local tyrant. Her name was Carol, and she was the president, treasurer, and self-appointed moral arbiter of our homeowners association. This little slice of suburban paradise was supposed to be my quiet retreat. After my wife, Martha, passed away, the old house felt too big, too full of echoes. I needed a clean slate, a place where the memories wouldn't ambush me in every room. I'm a structural engineer, a man who spends his days making sure buildings don't fall down. I appreciate order, logic, and clear rules. An HOA-managed community seemed, on paper, like a perfect fit. The brochure had promised harmonious living and community standards. What it failed to mention was that these standards were enforced by a woman whose primary source of joy seemed to be the misery of others. Carol was a woman in her mid-50s who moved with the stiff-backed certainty of someone who has never been told no. Her hair was a helmet of blonde spray, her face a permanent mask of disapproval. Our first run-in was over the color of my welcome mat. It was a cheerful blue. Apparently, only earth tones were permitted. I received a violation notice with a $5 fine. I changed the mat. It wasn't a hill worth dying on. Then it was the placement of my garbage cans. They had to be precisely 3 feet from the curb, handles facing the house, and brought in no later than 6 p.m. on trash day. I got a $10 fine for bringing mine in at 6:15. I started setting an alarm. But the packages were her magnum opus. I work a hybrid schedule. Some days I'm home, drafting blueprints at my dining room table. Other days, I'm on site for hours, climbing through steel skeletons of future buildings. This meant packages sometimes sat on my covered porch for a few hours before I got home. According to Carol, this was an aesthetic blight upon the pristine face of Maple Creek Estates. It lowered property values. It invited porch pirates, though our crime rate was statistically 0. It was, in her words, a display of profound laziness and disregard for the community. I had tried reasoning with her. I explained my job. I assured her the packages were never there overnight. Her response was a dismissive wave. Rules are rules. If you can't abide by them, perhaps you should have chosen to live elsewhere. So when I heard her screeching and the thudding sounds, I knew she had finally escalated. I walked to the front window and peered through the blinds. There she was, a stormtrooper in a pastel tracksuit, standing on my lawn. She was grabbing the boxes from my porch and, with a grunt of furious effort, heaving them over the 6-foot privacy fence into my backyard. One box was from a specialty hardware supplier, full of calibrated measurement tools. Another contained some books I'd ordered. A third, a small, square package, looked oddly familiar. Then I saw it. The last box. It was long and flat, marked with fragile tape all over. My heart seized in my chest. It was a custom frame, ordered to house the last photograph Martha and I had taken together. It was our anniversary, just a month before the diagnosis. Her smile in that picture was the last truly happy one I remembered. Carol grabbed it, her face contorted in a sneer of righteous fury. She hoisted it, and with a final, triumphant, "This is a violation," she flung it over the fence. I didn't hear a thud. I heard a sharp crack, followed by the faint, tinkling sound of breaking glass. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, cold severance. The part of me that was willing to be reasonable, to compromise, to seek peace, it just went silent. In its place, a cold, clear thought formed, as precise and unyielding as a steel beam. She had gone too far. This was no longer about welcome mats or garbage cans. This was a declaration of war. And if there's one thing an engineer knows, it's how to build something strong, and how to systematically take something apart. I walked out the front door, my face a calm, placid mask. Carol was dusting her hands, a smug look of accomplishment on her face. "Problem solved," she said, as if she'd just done me a great favor. I didn't look at her. I walked past her, around the side of the house, and unlatched the gate to my backyard. The scene was one of petty destruction. The boxes were scattered across the grass. The long, flat one was bent in the middle, a spiderweb of cracks visible through a tear in the cardboard. I picked up the small, square package she'd tossed. The shipping label was right there, clear as day. The name on it was Carol Peterson. The address was for the house directly across the street. Hers. It must have been delivered to my place by mistake. I had set it by my door, planning to walk it over to her after I finished my conference call. I held it up, turning it so she could see her own name. "You know, Carol," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I believe this one is yours." Her smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then anger. "Don't be ridiculous. Why would my package be on your porch?" "The mail carrier must have made a mistake," I said simply. "I was going to bring it over. But you saved me the trip." I gave the box a little toss in my hand. "Hope it wasn't anything fragile." She stared at the box, then at me, her mind clearly struggling to process this new information. Her self-righteous narrative had just hit a logical snag, and the gears were grinding. But her arrogance quickly won out. "Well, you shouldn't let packages accumulate. It's your fault for creating a confusing situation," she snapped, already rewriting reality to fit her worldview. I didn't argue. I just looked from her face to the broken frame on the ground, and then back again. I let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. I let her see the coldness in my eyes. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. A common mistake people made with me. They saw a quiet, reserved man and assumed he was a pushover. They didn't understand that I don't waste energy on loud displays. I conserve it. I analyze. I plan. "I'll be sending you a bill for the damages," I said, my tone flat and final. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You do that. The HOA will fine you for making baseless accusations. I have every right to maintain community standards." She turned on her heel and stomped back to her own perfectly manicured kingdom, leaving me in the wreckage of her little tantrum. I stood there for a long time, looking at the broken frame. The quiet, grieving man who had moved here for peace was gone. In his place stood a structural engineer with a new project. Project deconstruction. The first phase of any project is data collection. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my drafting table with a yellow legal pad and a sharpened pencil. I wrote down every interaction I'd had with Carol. The welcome mat. The garbage cans. The passive-aggressive newsletter entries. The verbal warnings. And today's main event, destruction of property and tampering with mail. I noted dates, times, and her exact words as best as I could recall. My engineer's mind craved precision. Eyewitness accounts were good, but empirical evidence was better. The next morning, I drove to a big-box electronics store. I didn't buy the cheap, all-in-one security systems. I bought 4 high-resolution, weatherproof cameras with night vision and wide-angle lenses. I also bought a dedicated hard drive with terabytes of storage. I wasn't just looking to catch her in the act, I was building a case file. Installing them was easy. I knew the best angles, the load-bearing points on the eaves where I could mount them for maximum stability and discretion. One was aimed directly at my front porch, capturing the entire approach from the street. A second was positioned to cover the fence line, specifically the spot where she had thrown the packages. A third watched my driveway, and a fourth had a clear view of the street, including the front of Carol's house. They were small, unobtrusive, and from the ground, they looked like little more than ventilation caps or insect repellents. They were perfect. Phase 2 was investigation. I requested a copy of the HOA covenants and bylaws. I received a thick, spiral-bound document full of dense legalese. Most people would have been intimidated. I read it like a blueprint. I spent the next 3 nights with a highlighter and a pot of coffee, dissecting every article, every subsection. I wasn't just looking for the rules she was using against me, I was looking for the rules she herself was breaking. And I found them. Little things, at first. The rules stated that all official notices of violation had to be sent via certified mail. She always just stuck them in my mailbox or taped them to my door. The bylaws required a quarterly budget meeting, open to all homeowners. A quick check of the community calendar showed there hadn't been one in over a year. She just posted a one-page summary in the newsletter, full of vague categories like landscaping and administrative costs. This was sloppy. Tyrants often are. They get so used to their power being unquestioned that they forget the very rules that grant them that power. Her arrogance was a structural flaw, and I was going to put a stress test on it. I also went to the county clerk's office. I pulled the public records for every property in Maple Creek Estates. I cross-referenced the HOA's founding documents with state laws governing homeowners associations. It turned out, our HOA's charter required them to refile with the state every 2 years to remain in good standing. A quick search of the state's database showed their status was delinquent. It had expired 6 months ago. Technically, legally, our HOA didn't exist. Carol was the queen of a phantom kingdom. This was more than just a crack in the foundation. This was a sinkhole. But it wasn't enough. Exposing this would dissolve the HOA, but Carol might just walk away with a bruised ego. I wanted more. I wanted accountability. Poetic justice. The landscaping budget in her financial summary had always seemed high. Maple Creek Landscaping LLC, the company listed, had a very generic name. A little more digging online, a cross-reference with state business filings, and I found the jackpot. The registered agent for Maple Creek Landscaping was a man named Gary Peterson. A quick social media search confirmed it. Gary was Carol's brother-in-law. I took a drive the next day to the address listed on the business filing. It wasn't an office. It was a small, run-down house with a single rusty pickup truck in the driveway. The truck had a magnetic sign for Gary's Lawn Care slapped on the door. Not Maple Creek Landscaping. I parked down the street and watched for an hour. Gary came out, threw a push mower in the back of his truck, and drove off. This wasn't a major landscaping firm capable of handling a 100-home subdivision. This was a one-man operation. My next step was to get a few quotes. I called 3 of the largest, most reputable landscaping companies in the city. I gave them our subdivision specs and asked for an estimate for basic weekly maintenance, mowing, edging, blowing the common areas. The quotes came back within a few days. The highest was for $2,500 a month. The HOA's financial summary, the one Carol had posted, listed the monthly landscaping expense as $7,000. There it was. A $4,500 a month discrepancy. That was $54,000 a year of our money, funneled from our HOA dues into her family's pockets. This wasn't just breaking the rules anymore. This was felony embezzlement. While I was digging into the financials, I didn't neglect the package situation. I was setting a trap, and I needed the right bait. I started ordering things. Not expensive things, just an assortment of items delivered by different carriers. I made sure to schedule deliveries for days I knew I'd be at a job site. The cameras recorded it all. Day after day, the footage showed Carol's Escalade pulling into her driveway. It showed her getting out, checking her own porch, then glaring across the street at mine. Her obsession was palpable. She would stand on her lawn, hands on her hips, just staring at the single, innocuous Amazon box sitting by my door. The recordings were silent, but I could almost hear her teeth grinding. I received the bill for the broken frame. $250. I made a high-quality copy of the invoice, attached a polite but firm letter explaining that she was responsible for the damage, and sent it to her via certified mail, return receipt requested. It was a formal escalation, all done by the book, her book. The green return receipt card came back to me a few days later, signed by Carol. She had received my letter. Her response came that evening. It wasn't a check. It was an official HOA envelope shoved into my mailbox. Inside was a fine. A $200 fine. The reason listed: improperly stored personal items on front porch, and scrawled at the bottom in angry red ink was a note, and another $100 fine for filing a frivolous and harassing complaint against the HOA president. Pay up. It was beautifully, predictably arrogant. She was using the very power she was abusing to punish me for calling out her abuse. She was digging her own grave deeper, one shovelful of hubris at a time. I scanned the fine and her handwritten note, and saved it to a folder on my computer labeled, Evidence. Carol, the file was getting thick. I needed an ally within the community. Most of my neighbors were polite but distant. They kept their heads down, paid their dues, and complied with the rules to avoid Carol's wrath. I'd seen her berate old Mr. Henderson for having a garden gnome. I'd watched her measure the length of the grass on the miller's lawn with a ruler. People were afraid of her. But there was one person I had a good feeling about. George, a retired accountant who lived 2 doors down. He was a quiet man, sharp as a tack, who spent most of his days tending his rose bushes. We'd exchanged pleasantries a few times. He had a dry wit and an air of quiet competence. An accountant's brain would be invaluable in deciphering the financial mess I was uncovering. I chose my moment carefully. I saw him outside on a Saturday morning, pruning his prize-winning roses. I wandered over, feigning an interest in gardening. "Those are beautiful, George," I started. He looked up, snippers in hand. "Thanks, Frank. They take a lot of work. Keeps me out of trouble," he paused, a twinkle in his eye. Which is more than I can say for some people around here. It was the perfect opening. "Speaking of trouble," I said, lowering my voice. "Have you ever taken a close look at the HOA's financials?" George stopped pruning. He looked at me, his gaze sharp and appraising. "I've tried. The summary she posts is a joke. No detail, no vendor invoices, no transparency. It's not how you run a clean set of books." "I have a feeling the books aren't clean at all," I said. I told him about Maple Creek landscaping, about the address, about the quotes I'd gotten. I didn't mention the delinquent state filing or the cameras yet. I was testing the waters. George listened intently, his expression growing more grim with every word. When I finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and looked me square in the eye. I knew it. I've had a bad feeling about her since she strong-armed her way into being president 2 years ago. The dues went up 20%, and the only thing that improved was the quality of her car. "I'm putting together a file," I said. "Documenting everything. I could use the help of someone who knows how to read a balance sheet." A slow smile spread across George's face. "Frank," he said, extending a gloved hand. "I've been waiting for someone with a spine to move into this neighborhood. Consider me on your team." With George on board, the plan accelerated. He knew the bylaws even better than I did. He pointed out a clause that allowed any homeowner to request a detailed financial audit, provided they could get 10% of the homeowners to sign a petition. "She'll fight it," George warned. "She'll say it's too expensive, that it's an unnecessary burden on the community." "Let her," I said. "Her resistance will only make her look more guilty." We spent the next week quietly canvassing the neighborhood. It was a delicate process. We couldn't come on too strong. We approached the people we thought were most likely to be fed up with Carol's reign of terror. Mr. Henderson, the garden gnome enthusiast. The Millers, of the overly scrutinized lawn. A young family who had been fined because their toddler's plastic slide was visible from the street. To each of them, we presented a simple case. We weren't making wild accusations. We just said we were concerned about the lack of financial transparency and the recent spike in dues, and we believed a professional audit was a reasonable request to ensure our money was being spent wisely. Some were too scared. They would listen, nod nervously, and then stammer an excuse about not wanting to get involved. But we got our signatures. 12 of them, 2 more than we needed. We drafted a formal petition, citing the exact article in the bylaws, and sent it to the HOA board, which consisted of Carol and 2 of her spineless cronies, via certified mail. The explosion was immediate. 2 days later, a special newsletter was slipped under every door in the neighborhood. The headline, in a massive, bold font, read, "Hostile takeover attempt by rogue homeowner." The letter, written by Carol, was a masterpiece of paranoid delusion and self-pity. It accused an unnamed, new resident, it was obviously me, of launching a malicious and divisive campaign to destroy our peaceful community. It claimed the demand for an audit was a personal attack, designed to bankrupt the HOA with exorbitant accounting fees. "This individual," she wrote, "is trying to bully your president and sow chaos, all because he refuses to follow simple rules that keep our neighborhood beautiful. Do not let one bad apple spoil our wonderful community." It was a declaration of open war. She was trying to poison the well, to turn the entire neighborhood against me before I could present a single piece of evidence. George called me the moment he read it. "She's rattled. This is the act of a desperate person. I know, I said, watching my security camera feed on my monitor. Carol was marching back and forth on her driveway, yelling into her phone. And desperate people make mistakes. It was time to set the final piece of bait. I went online and ordered the most obnoxious, difficult-to-handle item I could think of that still qualified for standard delivery, a giant, inflatable flamingo pool float. The box it came in was enormous, almost 5 feet tall, but weighed next to nothing. It was awkward, flimsy, and painted with pictures of a ridiculously cheerful pink bird. It was, in short, the perfect aesthetic affront to Carol's beige-toned world. I scheduled the delivery for a Wednesday, a day I had a 6-hour site inspection across town. According to my camera footage, Wednesday was the day Carol's cleaning lady came, meaning she was almost always home in the afternoon. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. Now, I just had to wait for the queen to move her piece onto the wrong square. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification. The camera on my porch had detected motion. I was miles away, standing on the 30th floor of a skyscraper in progress, but I could see my front porch as clearly as if I were standing in my living room. The delivery truck pulled up. The driver, struggling slightly with the huge, lightweight box, deposited the giant flamingo on my doorstep. It took up almost the entire porch. It was glorious. I kept the live feed open on my phone. For an hour, nothing happened. Then, just as I knew she would, Carol's front door opened. She emerged, saw the box, and froze. I could practically feel the wave of incandescent rage radiating from my phone's screen. She stood on her porch for a full minute, her body rigid. Then she marched across the street with a terrifying sense of purpose. She didn't just walk onto my property. She stomped, her pastel sneakers digging into my lawn. She got to the box and just stared at it, her lip curled in disgust. Then she did something I hadn't anticipated, something that elevated her crime from a misdemeanor to a serious felony. She tried to open it. Her perfectly manicured nails scraped at the packing tape. She was trying to see what was inside, her curiosity and anger overriding what little common sense she possessed. The camera, mounted just above and to the left of the door, had a perfect, high-definition view of her face and her hands working at the sealed box. This was no longer just destruction of property. This was mail tampering, a federal offense. After a few seconds of fruitless scratching, she gave up. Her frustration boiled over. She let out a scream of pure, unadulterated fury, a scream I couldn't hear, but could see in the way her whole body tensed. Then she started shoving the box. It was too big to lift, so she tried to push it over. It wobbled, resisted, then toppled over onto my azalea bushes. But that wasn't good enough for her. She wanted it out of sight. She put her shoulder into it and began to bulldoze it toward the side fence. The camera covering the fence line picked up the action perfectly. She shoved and kicked the giant box, grunting with effort, until she had it pressed against the fence. Then, with a final, mighty heave, she forced it over the top. It snagged on a picket, tearing the cardboard, before tumbling into my backyard. She stood there, panting, hands on her hips, surveying her work. A look of grim satisfaction settled on her face. Then she turned and marched back to her house, the conquering hero of Maple Creek Estates. I saved the footage. I downloaded it, made 3 separate backup copies, and uploaded one to a secure cloud server. I had it. Clear, undeniable video evidence of her committing at least 2 crimes on my property. The HOA board was legally required to respond to our petition for an audit within 30 days. Carol's response, that ridiculous newsletter, didn't count. We were on day 28. George and I drafted another letter. This one was sharper. We noted that the board was nearing its legal deadline to respond. We also formally requested a special meeting of all homeowners, as was our right under the bylaws, to discuss the board's failure to provide financial transparency and the president's recent pattern of homeowner harassment and property damage. We sent it, again, via certified mail. This time, the response was an official notice. A special meeting was called for the following Thursday at the community clubhouse. The agenda, written by Carol, was loaded. It listed our request last. Under new business, the first 3 items were discussion of new fines for porch clutter, vote on beautification mandate for lawn ornaments, and review of grievance procedures for complaints against the board. She was trying to control the narrative, to bury our concerns at the end of a long meeting after she'd already whipped everyone into a frenzy about gnomes and packages. It's a classic maneuver, George said, looking at the notice. She's trying to exhaust and demoralize everyone before we even get to speak. It won't work, I said. I'm not going to let it. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was tense. The air was thick with cheap coffee and resentment. Most of the residents sat with their arms crossed, looking anxious. Carol and her two board cronies, a mousy woman named Brenda and a perpetually confused-looking man named Bob, sat at a long table at the front, looking down at us like a tribunal. Carol ran the meeting with an iron fist. She droned on about the new fines, painting a grim picture of our neighborhood descending into chaos if people were allowed to express any form of individuality. She held up blurry photos she'd taken of a wind chime here, a slightly overgrown shrub there. This is what we're up against, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured drama. A slow creep of mediocrity. An erosion of our values. I sat patiently through the whole dog and pony show. I let her have her moment. I let her build her house of cards as high as she could. Finally, after an hour and a half, she got to the last item on the agenda. She sighed dramatically. And now, new business Mr. Miller, she said, deliberately using the wrong name, has some concerns he'd like to share. I stood up, holding a slim folder. The name is Frank, I said calmly. And yes, my neighbors and I do have some concerns. I walked to the front of the room. Carol watched me, a smirk on her face. She thought she had this under control. My concerns are twofold, I began, my voice steady and clear, projecting to the back of the room. First, the physical and financial security of our community. And second, the conduct of our HOA president. I started with the packages. Many of you know that President Peterson has an issue with packages being left on porches. She has taken it upon herself to solve this problem by repeatedly trespassing on my property and throwing my deliveries into my backyard. A murmur went through the crowd. Carol slammed her gavel. That is a baseless accusation. You have no proof. Actually, I do, I said. I pulled a tablet from my folder and connected it to the projector that Carol had been using for her photos of offending wind chimes. This is security footage from my home, taken last Wednesday afternoon. I pressed play. The room was silent as they watched the crystal-clear video of their HOA president marching onto my property, attempting to pry open my package, and then violently shoving the giant flamingo box over my fence. There were audible gasps. I paused the video on a perfect close-up of her face, contorted with rage. As you can see, this is not just a case of tidying up. This is trespassing, destruction of property, and, since she attempted to open a sealed package not addressed to her, it is also a federal crime under U.S. Code 1708-inch. Carol was on her feet, her face a blotchy red. This is an invasion of my privacy. You can't film me without my permission. That's illegal. Actually, Carol, it's not, I said, not taking my eyes off the crowd. There is no expectation of privacy when you are standing on someone else's property, in plain view of the street, committing a crime. Everything you see here is admissible as evidence. I turned back to the screen. But this is just a symptom of a much larger problem. The real issue is a lack of accountability and a gross misuse of our funds. This is where George stood up. As a retired CPA, he said, his voice carrying an authority Carol's lacked, I was concerned by the vague financial summaries we've been given. So, Frank and I did some digging. I switched the projector's input to my laptop. A spreadsheet filled the screen. This is our HOA's budget for landscaping, as provided by President Peterson. It shows a monthly payment of $7,000 to a company called Maple Creek Landscaping. I clicked to the next slide. It was a photo of the rundown house and the single rusty pickup truck. This is the headquarters of Maple Creek Landscaping. And here, I clicked again, showing the state business filing, are its owners. You'll note the registered agent is Gary Peterson, Carol's brother-in-law. The murmuring in the room grew louder. People were leaning forward, their apathy replaced by focused anger. We obtained professional quotes from 3 other major landscaping companies in the area, George continued, his tone methodical and damning. The highest quote for maintaining our common areas was $2,500 a month. We are being overcharged by $4,500 every single month. That's $54,000 a year that is being funneled from our dues directly into the president's family. Carol was screaming now, a stream of incoherent denials and threats. Lies. It's all lies. He's a troublemaker. Gary does extra work. He's worth every penny. Then you won't mind providing the detailed invoices for this extra work, will you, Carol? I asked, my voice cutting through her shrieks. And you won't mind explaining this, either. My final slide came up. It was a screenshot from the state's official website. Our HOA's name was at the top, and next to it, in big red letters, was the word, delinquent. Our HOA's legal charter expired 6 months ago, I announced to the stunned room. For the past 6 months, every fine that has been issued, every lien that has been threatened, every decision this board has made, has been done with zero legal authority. This HOA, under President Peterson's leadership, does not legally exist. The room erupted. The house of cards didn't just collapse, it was obliterated. People were on their feet, shouting questions, pointing fingers at the front table. Carol's face had gone from red to a pasty white. She looked cornered, a rat trapped in a maze of her own making. Her 2 cronies looked terrified. Bob seemed to be trying to shrink into his chair. But Brenda, the mousy treasurer, was staring at me. There was fear in her eyes, but there was something else, too. A flicker of hope. The meeting devolved into chaos. Carol, unable to control the crowd, grabbed her gavel and slammed it repeatedly, screaming for order, but her authority was gone. She was just a hysterical woman in a clubhouse. George and I had done what we set out to do. We had presented the facts. We had shown our neighbors the truth. But as I watched Carol's meltdown, I knew it wasn't over. I had publicly humiliated her. I had destroyed her little empire. A person like that doesn't just accept defeat. They retaliate. Viciously. I was right. The very next day, the smear campaign began. A new, anonymous newsletter appeared on everyone's doorstep. It was a rambling, unhinged manifesto that accused me of being a corporate spy sent by a developer to dissolve the HOA so the land could be bought up for condos. It claimed I had hacked into the HOA's computers and faked the financial documents. It even stooped to insinuating that a single man living alone was a potential danger to our children. It was vile. It was desperate. And it was pure Carol. Then she escalated. She called my office, posing as a concerned neighbor, and told my boss that I was running a criminal enterprise from my home and was under police investigation. My boss, a reasonable man who had known me for 15 years, called me into his office, listened to my side of the story for 5 minutes, and then told me not to worry about it. But the attempt was made. She was trying to ruin my livelihood. The final straw came that weekend. My late wife's sister, Claire, came to visit with her 2 young kids. We were in the backyard, grilling burgers, when my 10-year-old nephew kicked his soccer ball over the fence by accident. It landed in the common area behind my house. Before he could even run to the gate, Carol was there. She snatched up the ball, marched to my fence, and screamed over it. "This is community property. No toys allowed. I am confiscating this as evidence of your continued violations." My nephew started to cry. My blood ran cold. Harassing me was one thing. Making my grieving nephew cry over a soccer ball was another. I walked to the fence, my face like stone. "Carol," I said, my voice low and shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "Give the boy his ball back. Now." "This is evidence," she shrieked, clutching the ball like it was the crown jewels. "You and your delinquent family are a menace." That was it. The last thread of restraint I had snapped. This woman was not just a bully or a thief. She was a menace, devoid of empathy or decency. The plan had to move to its final phase. That night, after my sister and her kids had left, I received an anonymous email. It was from a generic, untraceable account. The message was short. "I know what she's doing. I have the real books. I can't live with this anymore. Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm Street tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone. I knew instantly who it was from. Brenda. The treasurer. The mousy woman who had looked at me with a flicker of hope at the meeting. My stand had given her the courage she needed. The next morning, I was at the coffee shop at 9:45. Brenda was already there, huddled in a corner booth, clutching a large purse to her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I've been a coward. Carol. She bullies everyone. She told me if I didn't sign off on the financials, she'd find a way to make my life miserable. She threatened to report my husband's small business for imaginary code violations." "You're not a coward, Brenda," I said gently. "You're doing the right thing now. That takes courage." She took a deep breath and opened her purse. She pulled out a USB drive and a stack of papers. "This is everything," she said, pushing it across the table. The real bank statements. The checks she wrote to her brother-in-law. The transfers she made from the HOA account to her personal credit card. She called them reimbursements for administrative supplies. She spent $5,000 of our money on a cruise last year. It was the smoking gun. Not just evidence of kickbacks, but direct, blatant embezzlement. "She's getting worse," Brenda continued, her voice trembling. "Since the meeting, she's been shredding documents. She told me yesterday she was planning to file a false police report against you, to claim you were harassing her, maybe even plant something on your property." I took the drive and the papers. "Brenda, you are incredibly brave for doing this. But you need to protect yourself. Are you willing to give a statement to the authorities?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes. I can't let her get away with this anymore. I can't be a part of it." I left the coffee shop with the final, undeniable proof. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to end this. I didn't go to the local police first. Brenda's information elevated this far beyond a simple neighborhood dispute. This was organized fraud. I compiled everything into a single, meticulously organized binder. The video footage, burned to a disk. The financial analysis George and I had prepared. The quotes from the other landscaping companies. The proof of the delinquent HOA charter. And now, the cherry on top, the bank statements and a sworn, notarized affidavit from Brenda, the HOA treasurer, detailing the embezzlement and Carol's plans to frame me. My first call was to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. They take mail tampering very, very seriously. I sent them the video file and a short explanation. My second call was to the district attorney's office, specifically their economic crimes unit. I explained the situation and emailed them a summary of the evidence. The response was swift. A postal inspector called me back within an hour. The DA's office scheduled a meeting for the next morning. They saw what I saw, a clear-cut case against a petty tyrant who had finally crossed a line into serious criminal territory. The final showdown needed to be public. It needed to be a moment of catharsis for the entire neighborhood. George and I used the bylaws one last time. We got the 12 signatories together again and formally petitioned for a vote of no confidence and the immediate removal of Carol Peterson as HOA president. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Carol, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over her head, saw this as her chance to crush the rebellion once and for all. She sent out a notice billing the event as a community forum to expel problem resident. She was planning to use the meeting to have me publicly voted out of the neighborhood, an action for which she had absolutely no legal authority, but that didn't matter to her. The night of the final meeting, the clubhouse was packed. It felt different this time. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a tense, electric anticipation. Word had spread about the embezzlement, about the expired charter. People weren't scared anymore. They were angry. I had coordinated with the DA's office and the postal inspector. They told me to proceed with the meeting as planned. They would be nearby. Carol started the meeting, her voice dripping with venom. "We are here tonight to discuss the toxic influence of Frank Miller," she began, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He has harassed your board, he has illegally spied on me, he has slandered my family's good name, and he has created a climate of fear and division." She was about to continue her tirade when I stood up and held up my hand. "Carol, I believe this meeting was called for a vote of no confidence in you. So let's get to it." "You have no right to speak," she shrieked. Everyone here has a right to speak, a voice called out from the back. It was Mr. Henderson, the garden gnome owner. And we want to hear what Frank has to say. A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. The power had shifted. Completely. I walked to the front of the room, calm and collected. I didn't need a projector this time. I had the truth. You all saw the evidence at the last meeting, I said, my voice ringing with clarity. You saw the video of Carol committing a federal crime. You saw the financial irregularities. Since that meeting, new evidence has come to light. I held up the binder. This contains sworn testimony and bank records provided by your own treasurer, Brenda, confirming that Carol has embezzled over $70,000 in HOA funds over the last 2 years. She paid for vacations, shopping sprees, and car payments with your money. Brenda, sitting in the front row, stood up. It's true, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I have the records. I've given them to the district attorney. She did it all. Carol looked at Brenda with a look of pure, murderous betrayal. Then she turned her rage back on me. You turned her against me. You faked those documents. You're a liar. Her tirade was cut short by the sound of the clubhouse doors opening. 2 stone-faced detectives from the DA's office walked in, followed by a man in a crisp U.S. Postal Inspection Service jacket. They walked calmly and deliberately toward the front table. The room fell utterly silent. One of the detectives addressed Carol, his voice devoid of emotion. Carol Peterson, you are under arrest for multiple counts of felony grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement. The postal inspector stepped forward. And ma'am, you are also being charged with obstruction of correspondence, a federal offense. We have a warrant to search your home and your vehicle. Carol stared at them, her mouth hanging open. The color drained from her face. Her entire world, the one she had built on a foundation of lies and intimidation, had just been demolished in a matter of seconds. She finally found her voice, but it was nothing more than a pathetic squeak. You can't do this. I am the president. Not anymore, you're not, the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. That's when she completely and totally lost it. It was a full-blown public meltdown. She started screaming, a wild, animalistic sound of pure rage and panic. She swiped all the papers off the table, sending them flying. She accused the detectives of being on my payroll, accused the whole neighborhood of being part of a vast conspiracy against her. He's the criminal, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me as they cuffed her hands behind her back. He's the one you should be arresting. As they started to lead her away, she twisted her head around, her eyes wild and full of impotent fury. Her final, hollow threat echoed through the silent room. You'll regret this, Frank. I'll own you. I'll sue you for everything you have. And then she was gone, her screeching fading as they put her in the back of an unmarked car. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With Carol gone, the neighborhood seemed to take a collective breath of fresh air. A new HOA board was elected. George became the new president, and Brenda, cleared of any wrongdoing due to her cooperation, stayed on as treasurer. The first order of business was to hire a real lawyer and a forensic accountant. They untangled the legal mess, properly re-established the HOA with the state, and began the process of clawing back the money Carol had stolen. All the ridiculous rules were abolished. The welcome mat color code, the garbage can placement regulations, the war on wind chimes, all gone. Mr. Henderson's garden gnome returned to its place of honor. Kids' toys were no longer considered a blight. People started talking to each other again, having block parties, and acting like actual neighbors. The cloud of fear had lifted. Carol's fate was exactly what she deserved. Faced with an ironclad case on both state and federal levels, she took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Her house was sold at auction to pay for the restitution she owed the HOA and to cover her massive legal bills. Her brother-in-law, Gary, was also charged with fraud and lost his business. They were ruined, financially and socially. I finally got the peace I had moved here for. I could sit on my front porch, watch the sunset, and not worry about a shrieking tyrant measuring my grass. The photograph of Martha and me now hangs in a beautiful new frame, a place of honor in my living room. Sometimes, when I'm out walking, a neighbor will stop me and thank me. They call me a hero. I don't see it that way. I'm just an engineer. I saw a faulty structure that was a danger to everyone around it, and I took it down, piece by piece, until the foundation was exposed. I just wanted to be left alone, but she forced my hand. I learned that sometimes, the only way to get peace is to go to war. And sometimes, the most satisfying justice isn't loud or explosive, but quiet, methodical, and built on a foundation of cold, hard facts. She thought her power was absolute, but she forgot that even the tallest towers can be brought down by a flaw in their design.